Okay, so we finally gathered together, Baruch Hashem. How many already were zochet to go to the cemetery this morning? Okay, so we're planning, Be'ezrat Hashem, that tomorrow morning we go as well to the cemetery, and I went there myself today at 10:15, and it was a tremendous nisayon to stay there only for 45 minutes. Usually when I go, I stay there many hours because there's so many different places to daven by and to discover and to explore. It's really one of the Batei Chayim in the world, I would say, that has the concentration of so many Chachamim. In different places, they have different Chachamim buried in different places, but in one Bet HaKvarot, that for generations upon generations, there was so many tzaddikim, that's something that's not found so easily. It was Ir Ve'em B'Yisrael. Fez was in the Torah world an Ir Ve'em B'Yisrael for at least a good 900 years. Until recently, it was a place of tremendous Limud Torah. I said, whoever heard this on the bus, I'll go over it quickly, that in Morocco, there's been already for over 2,000 years, there have been Jews. The Shlomo HaMelech's son, according to a tradition, is buried in a very, very far out place, in a very difficult place to access. The only way you could access is if you barter sheep in order to get entrance, or goats to get in. It's like currency doesn't even work over there. I've never been there. But more recently, in the time of the early Rishonim, the Rif, obviously, Rav Yitzchak Alfasi, taught over here. His student, the Rimigash, was the Av Bedin of this city, of the city of Fez, at 14 years old. So there was a career already. The Rimigash started. We all learned the Rimigash. We all know about the Rimigash. And the Rimigash had a Talmud where Rabbeinu Maimon. Rabbeinu Maimon was the father of the Rambam. Did anybody get to see the house of the Rambam yet? I don't know if they were able to go. It's deep in the Shuk. You could see the sundial. They said tomorrow we're going to be able to go to the house of the Rambam. That's obviously something very special. The Even Ezra. Now that it's Yud Zayin B'Tammuz, we one of the kinot that the Even Ezra wrote was on the city of Fez and on its destruction and its apparent its decimation, and he was very sad and lamenting about it. And then started the revival once again of the city through those coming from Spain, not necessarily in the time of the Gerush Sfarad, but even earlier. Earlier, already there was persecution by the church in Spain that Jews would be leaving, and a lot of them would come to Morocco, and they were called the Toshavim. I was zocher to go to my grandfather's kever today. His name was Raphael Rimok. The Rimok family is documented as leaders of the Toshavim. In the 1400s, they were involved in the big machloket. There was a very, very fierce machloket called the machloket haneficha, the machloket of the lungs, as we call it, a blowing of the lungs, whether that makes an animal kosher or not kosher. Rabbeinu Tam is of the opinion in a few places in Shas that if you have a sircha that's attached to the dofen of the animal, you could remove the sircha. The sircha is an adhesion by the lung that we're not sure if there's a hole or not. And if you would blow the lung, you would be me'apech the lung. You could see if it's kosher or not. So the Toshavim were always very machmer, and they didn't accept such meat. And the Migurashim came from Morocco. I on the bus I said the whole history for different buses, so I don't know If some of you have heard this or not, I don't want to repeat myself, that the Megurashim came in 1492, and they were stronger, they were more prominent, they were very learned, and they had connections. They really took over the community. They built the community. The Megurashim built the community in 1492. The Abarbanel writes that 50,000 Jews escaped Spain and came to Morocco. Some of them went to Turkey, some of them went to Egypt, to Syria, but many of them came to Morocco, 50,000 of them. And you can understand, Tiltul Aderech was very hard. There was a Megefa and a fire that destroyed 30,000 people. It was horrible. And there was only 20,000 left in the Yishuv, Fez, the capital of Fez. And that's when the generation of Torah started to be rebuilt again. It was like a mini destruction that was revived once again with the Megurashim. So the Megurashim built slowly by slowly the community with different takanot that they had, with different different enactments that they made throughout the generation. The Batei Dinim here were very authoritative, and they were very strong. They made their own takanot whenever they felt that things were not correct. I'll give you an example. Till today, when there is a Moroccan wedding, they write at the end of the ketubah, ve'akol keminhag hamigurashim mikastilia, Hashem yishmor tzuram v'yinakem nikmatam v'yishmor al she'erit pelitatam. That's what's written at the end of every Moroccan ketubah. What does that mean? Hakol kitakanad minhag migurashim. So many times Chatanim ask me to write that in because it's a nice nusach about the Megurashim from Castilia. It came from Castile, from Spain. It's actually a takana that's very protective of the woman. The Tur writes in Even Ezer, I think Siman Kuf Dalid, about the takana of Toledo, Tolitula, which was that what would happen is that a woman would come into a marriage with a dowry. The father would give her a dowry, and lo aleinu, death was rampant. And if the woman would die, so the husband's going to be yoresh everything, and he's going to give it to his kids that he had from a previous marriage. So the takana that the Tur already writes is that within the first year of marriage, everything goes back to her. And the minhag of Castilia was to add on to that some more protection, to give her rights, some more protective rights about that she has a choice. I think even if in a longer time, and these things are written in the ketubah. They're binding because if a person's from that community of Castilia and he is subject to those takanot, so that's what he goes by. So that's the takanot of Castilia. They had takanot in all different ways. There's volumes of Miknes, which is like this thick, about different takanot of hilulas that they shouldn't get out of hand, of tzedakot that they shouldn't be exploited, of weddings that they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be excessive. Same type of takanas that we do nowadays, they had in those days as well. It's the same thing. It just goes over again. So throughout the generations, these Chachamim really were able to build up Torah. But what I call the golden era of Morocco started from 1650 all the way until the late 1800s. That was the golden era of Morocco. There you had an explosion of tremendous Talmidei Chachamim in the generation. And you had the Orachayim in Saleh. You had Ben Atar Ibn Tzur in Fez. You had the Berdugo Toledano Misas dynasty in Meknes. And in Tangier, you had as well great Rabbanim, the Bibas family, and then later the Ben Walid family. And these were centers of Torah to the highest level. You can imagine if Morocco produced an Or HaChaim HaKadosh, he wasn't an exception. He wasn't an exception. There was many Geonim in his time that he himself writes. He writes about his Rebbe, Rabbi Moshe Berdugo. He writes in Parashat Shoftim, on the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, on the Parasha, that I remember Mori V'Rabbi Rabbi Moshe Berdugo, who would never look at the Balei Dinim. Whenever they would walk in, he would hide, he would put his face down. Rabbi Moshe Berdugo is buried 45 minutes away from here in the city of Meknes, where the Or HaChaim was many times, and he lived there for a short tkufa. So that was the golden era. So since we're in Fez, I'll focus on a few of the Chachamim that were in Fez at the time. There was one Chacham that he was in Morocco, but he escaped, and he brought Kabbalah to Tunisia. His name was Rabbi Avraham ben Musa. And I'll share with you a special story that happened with myself and Rabbi Avraham ben Musa. There's a song, Nirdi Natan Recho. It's a very famous Sephardic song, and it was composed by Rabbi Avraham ben Musa. If anybody in the yeshivas learn Masechet Yoma, there's a sefer called Siach Yitzchak by Rav Yitzchak Nunis. It's on Chagiga, it's on Yuma, you know the sefer? The Siach Yitzchak quotes Rav Avraham ben Musa 400 times. He says he's based on his sefer. Rav Avraham ben Musa left behind writings that were never published. And one of my passions, you'll hear about over Shabbat, I'm sure, it's going to come out again, is that I attempt to restore and to publish writings from these great Geonim that didn't have an opportunity to publish their manuscripts. So that manuscript particularly is found in Oxford University, and there's a Talmid Chacham in Beitar that wanted to help publish it, and he contacted me, and we published it together. It's called the Shita Ktav Yad on Masechet Yoma. At the time I was living in Toronto, and I was learning with a certain person over there. His name is Nisim Wanunu, and he wanted to really dedicate this book, to put it out. And we started the process of publishing the writings and to disseminate these writings. At that time, a few things happened. Number one, his son had an asthma attack. 22-year-old son, Netanel, had an asthma attack. It took the paramedics 45 minutes to get there. Don't know, I guess he didn't call Hatzalah. It took 45 minutes in Toronto for the paramedics to get there. By the time they got there, he was brain dead. At that time, Canada also made a law to socialize medicine to the max, to the point that they're able to decide when to pull the plug if they feel that somebody's brain dead. Obviously, the Jewish Frum community was up in arms, and we're not going to accept such a psak, such a gzeira. And this was the first case where it was going to be implemented in our community, that he was really brain dead. He was in North York Hospital in Toronto. And unfortunately, it was a very serious situation, and they wanted to end his life. The whole community, the whole Toronto community lobbied very strong. They showed up at the courthouse. The Sephardi community, the Ashkenazi community, the the Lubavitch, the Hasidim, everyone showed up at the courthouse, and they made a very strong case. The judge saw all these people, and he put an injunction. He didn't let them continue with pulling out the plug. So this boy was taken, kept on living. Eventually, he passed away. He passed away on his own naturally. A sad story, but he passed away. As we were preparing for the publication of the book, we decided, obviously, it's going to be the Ilu Nishmato. So almost a year passed by. And as we're finally ready for print, so the printer calls me up, Bibbahala, he says, I read the Hagdama that it's Le'ilu Nishmat, this boy, and you wrote it's Chaf Aleph Adar. Do you realize that the yahrzeit of Avram ben Musa was also Chaf Aleph Adar? I said, yes, not only that, my birthday is Chaf Aleph Adar. So it was a crazy story of obviously it was a sad story, but it's a story that within it you see the hashgacha that this person was supposed to live to a certain time. They didn't know why he had this gzeira upon him, but the schut of this tzaddik was left behind. That was Rav Avram ben Musa. Rav Avram ben Musa escaped Fez because the governess at the time was very bad to the Jews. So she made a gzeira against them, and he was mekalel her that her breath should smell horrible. I feel like that today. So it was obviously, she suspected that Rav Avram ben Musa had something to do with it. They went to ask him for a bracha that she should be healed. So he said if she promises not to bother the Jews again, he'll give her a bracha that she should be healed. She said yes. He healed her, but he knew that he was going to get caught very soon, so he escaped to Tunisia. He taught Kabbalah in Tunisia, the Torah of the Arizal. The Torah of the Arizal was taught in Tunisia, the Lombroso family and others. He is buried in the center of the city of Tunisia. If you go today, I know this because Rav Yaakov Hillel's children, also they printed on Masechet Sota, the Minchat Sota for Avram ben Musa. If you ever heard of the Perush on Masechet Sota, Minchat Sota. He is buried in the back of a rent-a-car shop. Why? Because the Chachamim were buried around the center of Tunisia, and they wanted the non-Jews there wanted to build, so they were mefane a lot of the kvarim. It's written in an article. I have a British newspaper that they recorded this, that in the early 1900s, when they attempted to move the caver of Avram ben Musa, once, twice, 3 times, there was people died with a guy who was pulling an axe, and he got his arm chopped. It was horrible stories that happened because they were trying to build a railroad track, the subway, just like the subways happening in Eretz Yisrael. They were trying to do that over here, and Rav Avram ben Musa's caver was not able to be moved, so they gave up, and he is in back of a rental car shop. If you go to Tunis ever, please let me know. I'll tell you exactly where it is and where you could go. You could ask the shopkeeper. They've tried to buy it from him. He doesn't want to, but it's an active caver. So that was one of the great Geonim of Fez, Rav Avram ben Musa. He's one of the authors of the Sefer Mikdash Melech al Hazor from Rabbi Shalom Buzaglo, printed it. Some of the authors were in Marrakesh that we visited their caver. That was Rav Avram ben Musa. Now to get to the Geonim of the Geonim of Fez, I'm building up to the Geonim and to the time of Lala Solika as well. In the time of Fez, there was also, when you go into the Bet HaKvarot tomorrow, those of you who want to come to the Bet HaKvarot, so you will notice that there is a few sections. Right away when you enter, there's a section of tremendous Talmidei Chachamim called the Monsonego family. Rav Yedidia Monsonego was the Baal Bechaber Sefer Dvar Emet, quoted in the Achronim many times. And he wrote many Piskei Dinim. But as you enter in, there's a cave over there, called built cave, they built it, called the Cave of the Lions, Gova Arayot. There Rav Shlomo Ibn Denan I spoke about today, whoever was with me in the cemetery today, he was the chief rabbi of Morocco in 1920, Rav Rafael Ankawa, who was buried in Saleh, and it's right next to Rabat, was appointed by the king to be the chief rabbi. And he says, I'm not going to sign a document if not Rav Shlomo Ibn Danan first. And he takes my salary. That's how they dealt with rabbinics. Instead of fighting for the position, they fought that the others should have the position. So Rav Alanko, I gave them to Rav Shlomo Ibn Danan. He wrote two major Sfarim called Bakesh Shlomo and Asher Li Shlomo, quoted hundreds of times by Achronim such as Rav Ovadia Yosef and others. Very basic Sfarim on halacha. He's buried, but he was later, in the 1920s. I'm just going through the cemetery. There's also Rav Yedidio Montenegro, who passed away in 1994, chief rabbi of one of the last chief rabbis of Morocco. Then you have going in towards the middle, that's where you have the center of great tzaddikim that are buried there. Among them, Rav Shmuel Elbaz, Rosh Yeshiva in the time of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, that the Orach Chaim HaKadosh wrote on him that he was Konim Memchet Kinyonei HaTorah. Right? They don't say that about any of us. Orach Chaim said this about Rav Shmuel Elbaz. Rav Eliyahu HaTzarfati, a student of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Rav Yaakov Kenizal, who they recently discovered. I don't know if I said the story before, so I'm not going to go over it again. Rav Yaakov Kenizal, that they used to daven by his kaver for rain in the time of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh and others. For generations, they would be davening by his kaver for rain. Lived in the 1500s. One of the Kadmoinim. And in the middle, you have a very large ohel that was recently built. And today it gave us a lot of shade and a lot of wind, so we were able to have a little bit of menucha from the sun. And that's Rav Yehuda ben Atar. Right next to Rav Yehuda ben Atar is Lala Solika. So I would like to speak about Lala Solika in depth, but I would like to I don't want other people who are planning on hearing Lala Solika to move it. So I don't know until what time I'm speaking, whether I should speak about Rav Yehuda ben Atar now and wait a little bit later for Lala Solika, or speak about Lala Solika now and speak about it in a different group. I don't want you to hear it twice. So I'm a little bit. I know some people came for Lala Solika over here, and I definitely like to speak about her, but I think that it depends on the time, how long they want us to have. Could somebody ask Rabbi Eli how long we have? And we'll start with Rav Yehuda ben Atar. Yehuda ben Atar is buried in the center, and he was known as the great Gaon of the generation. He never wanted to be mitparnes. He never wanted to be sustained by the rabbinic institution and getting a salary. So he worked as a goldsmith. As there are Muslims till today that have some of his gold banglets, and they know that it's a segula, so they keep it. Because in Arabic he was called El Kbir, the great one. He was called the great Rav of Morocco. 6:15. We have till 6:15. Oh, but they want me to speak till 6:15. Okay, fine. So we have time to speak about Rav Yehuda ben Atar. And I'm sorry? And Solika will speak towards the end. And we'll speak about Solika towards the end. So there's going to be two things for Solika. I asked that there should be photocopies by the desk. I don't know if they had that. If I could have somebody go see, not now, but a little bit later about these copies, then it would be important. And that way I would be able to share it with everyone, something that I prepared for Solika. So Rav Yehuda ben Atar, being that he was a goldsmith, I said this by the caver today. I'll say this story, even though some of you may have heard it, but I'll go over some new stories now. Rav Yehuda ben Atar was summoned by the king's palace for a big simcha that they were having. So for the big simcha, they wanted to have all the goldsmiths there. And they're going to make beautiful jewelry and whatever else for the wedding. I guess, I hope it's a hostess gift, hostess bags. They would put in some of the jewelry. I don't know what it was, but they asked him to come and they asked him to work on Shabbat. Rav Yehuda ben Attar said, no, I'm not working on Shabbat. They didn't like the fact that he said no to the king, so they threw him into the lion's den. This story is written by the Chida and it's written on the caver. They threw him into the lion's den. Once he got to the lion's den, the lions did not touch him. After a while, they realized that they might have not been so smart by throwing the rabbi into the lion's den. So they extracted him out, and they wanted to know if the lions were hungry or not, and the person that really got him in trouble in the first place was there, so they threw him, and before he landed, the lions devoured him. Exact same story with Daniel that happened, that they, when they took Daniel out, Migova Arayot, they threw somebody else, and that person was devoured right away. That was Rav Yehuda ben Attar. People mistake this story with the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, because it was also ben Attar, but it's a different story with him. Maybe there was a lion story with him, a different type of story, but this story about Rav Yehuda ben Attar and the lion, there's a lion on his kever. His Hilula is on Yut Tet Sivan. A cousin of mine takes care of the Hilula, and she sent me a picture of the fire that was going on, and she said people were saying that they saw an image of a lion in the fire. Yehuda, they saw a picture of a lion in the fire. My friend confirmed it with ChatGPT. I don't know how reliable that is, but there the Hilula started to be rejuvenated recently on Yutet Sivan. There's a few, 100, maybe 200 people over here, and they started recently to revive the Hilula. There's been different Hilulas that have been having a Tchias HaMesem. I don't know if you know, but the Hilula of Rav Yitzchak Abuchatzera, which is a whole different area in Morocco. Rav Yitzchak Abuchatzera was the youngest son of Rav Yaakov Abuchatzera, named after the Arizal. He was there was a brother that Rav Baba Sali had also called Rav Yitzchak Abuchatzera Baba Chaki, who was the Rav of the city of Ramle and was nifter in a horrible car crash in Eretz Yisrael. But that's not the Rav Yitzchak Abuchatzera that's buried over here. The Rav Yitzchak that's buried over here was Rav Yitzchak Demin Tulal from the city of Tulal. 1912, I believe, he was traveling on a fundraising trip on Friday, and he knew that he was going to pass away, and he was murdered by bandits right on the road, and he was buried right before Shabbat in a kfar of Tulal. It's a very remote and difficult place to get to. However, there have been Jews, specifically from Casablanca, have been flying for ever since this happened, from the 1912s, have been flying to his Hilula, and they actually build houses over there, and they would stay there for the week in this city of Tulal. This is if you would take the road from Marrakesh, it would take about 8 hours. Over here also it would take about 8 hours. It's different direction, but there's different roads. It's a long trip. Many people have been doing it, but in the recent 5 years, it's exploded. This year, it always happens on Yud Daled B'Shvat. I think 10,000 people from all over the world came. He's the Segula of the Arak, is said on the people all over. For Yitzchak Demin Tulal, just to understand, these weren't tzaddikim that just came out of nowhere. They worked and they worked in their avodat Hashem their whole life. Rav Yitzchak Abuchatzera secluded himself for 5 years and learned Sefer Hakaneh, which is Rav Nechunya Hakaneh on the Derech Avoda, and he for 5 years he says he didn't see the tzura of any female, and he to break his Yetzer Hara totally. Him and Baba Sali would learn. Baba Sali was his nephew. They would learn Shas Be'iyun 5 or 6 times over in that time. Be'iyun, they learned all of Shas, and he would have the Ta'anit Hafsaka that he would do, which was from Motzei Shabbat to Friday night. I have a friend who's a doctor that doesn't believe that it's able to be done according to medical science. I have never tried it. Today is already a difficult fast, but being in the sun. But there is many Chachamim that did this Ta'anit Hafsaka. The Chemdat Yamim writes that it's Keneged 2,000 something fasts. If a person fasts, there is a grandson of Baba Sali, Rav Shlomo Buso. Those of you who heard of him, he lives in Harnov. He still does it once a year. The Ta'anit Hafsaka. He takes vitamins beforehand, or whatever but he does this Ta'anit Hafsaka. No food, no water, no drinks, from Motzei Shabbat to Friday afternoon. That's what Abu Chatzeras would do. And then Baba Sali actually did it when he was young, and he got scolded by his older brother of David Abu Chatzera. How could he do such things? So I got into this for Yitzchak Mitulal. There was a rejuvenation of davening by Yeskever because so many Yeshuot have been happening by Yeskever. I could give you a whole shiur of Yeshuot that just happened with myself. That's why I keep on going back. I do see that I have a special siyata dishmaya, and I was mekabel on myself to Bli Neder to print some of his works in English to make it more accessible to the tzibur. He has a beautiful sefer called Lev Tahor on Tefillah, where he gives 50 explanations on the word Tefillah, how it could different lessons, how to impact our life in Tefillah. We're hoping that we'll be able to publish it soon, but it requires a lot of work still. But these are the tzaddikim of the Abu Chatzera family, which started with Rav Yaakov Abu Chatzera, which is why I want to see if those photocopies are ready, because Rav Yaakov Abu Chatzera wrote a piyut on Lala Solika that I want people to be able to read and to be familiar with, and to know the. Yeah, I guess my wife is going to go check. So the. How often did he do this tainus? I know grandmothers who did this tainus. There's not only tzaddikim, grandmothers who did this tainus. In other words, I grew up in Montreal. I wasn't born in Fez, but my grandmother, who I knew my one grandmother well, my other grandmother's in Eretz Yisrael. My two grandfathers, I never knew them. They were both in the city of Fez. One grandfather, my paternal grandfather, took care of the yeshiva here in Fez, and then he was brought to Eretz Yisrael in the 50s. They told him to throw his tefillin out. That's what they told him. Obviously, he didn't, and they made him do breaking labor, and he was nifter young. So I never met him. I'm named after him, Mordechai. Then my maternal grandfather was a prominent, wealthy businessman that lived not far away from here in Fez. As a matter of fact, the director of operations of the Marriott, his name is Mehdi, said that he would take me to his house, take me to a house where my mother grew up in. I'd love to see that, see if that happens. But they say it's a building now. It's not a regular place. And he was nifter young. I said the story by the caver that 15 years before my mother was born, he had a stroke, and Chevra Kadisha said Shema on him, and unexplicitly he woke up, and he had 3 children after that, and where my mother is one of the children that were born after that. I wouldn't have been around if not for that. So I said by the caver today, Baruch she'asa li nes b'makom hazeh. Baruch she'asa li nes b'makom hazeh. Obviously it's a very emotional, emotional miracle. You don't know what zichriyot, when things happened. I have a lot of. There's a lot of grandchildren that came out of those last 3 girls, that were born afterwards. So we are. There was a lot. So my grandmother, I'm just saying. So she was born and raised over here. She wasn't. She came from different lineage of rabbinics, but she didn't go to Beis Yaakov. She never went to Beis Yaakov. But all day she would be with a Tehillim in her hand, davening. All day. It would be davening Tehillim. That's all I remember from her. Davening at Tehillim. It was known that the women would be so careful on not uncovering their hair that they would have a towel whenever they would wash themselves. They would have a towel on top of their head. It was Yadua, the Nashim Tzidkaniyot. So people ask me all the time, how come there were so many tzaddikim specifically that came from Morocco? There was thousands of them. There was where does that come from? It's a place that breeded a lot of kedusha v'tahara. I live in Los Angeles. Do you know the billboards that we have to drive by and see, and the craziness that goes on? Over here, you're not going to see those type. Even till today, you're not allowed to check into a hotel if you're not officially married. There's no such thing. There's other laws as well. There's laws that you can't just show affection outdoors just like that. It's not it's not the most religious country, but there was an emphasis on kedusha v'tahara, on sniut, that there was more than other places, and I think it had a tremendous amount of siyata dishmaya, of tzaddikim of the highest caliber. Again, the only chacham that I assume that you heard of before this trip was the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. So that's why I always have to refer to the Orach Chaim HaKadosh as a point of reference. But the Orach Chaim HaKadosh was not brought up in a vacuum, that he was the great Gaon and everybody were Amaratzim. He was one of the great Gaonim, to the point that when he came to the city of Fez, Rav Shmuel Elba says, "Here, you be the Rosh Yeshiva." So obviously he was one of the great Gedolei Ador. Thank you so much. Obviously he was one of the great Gedolei Ador. But he himself discusses the Gdolim that he grew up around. So you'd imagine 50, 100 Gedolei Ador lived in this city, in Meknes, in Saleh. It's staggering. It's staggering to even think about the Torah that they left behind that we don't even have access to. Some Torah we have, some we don't. Baruch Hashem, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh's Torah, he was able to escape to Livorno, which is a whole different history, why he left Morocco. He didn't leave Morocco only to print his books. He left Morocco because he was persecuted in Dinei Torah, in Yerusha, and in threats. So that's why he left, and he from there he went to Eretz Yisrael. And Baruch Hashem, we were zochet to get his books, and Baal Shem Tov got his books, and there was the chibur between the Hasidim and the Sephardim came together. And as I mentioned, that I am very heavily contemplating becoming Hasidish after this trip. I always had a philosophy in life that I work with Ashkenazim and I party with Moroccans. But I see but Hasidim also know how to be a lot of besimcha. So we don't have so many in Los Angeles, so I wouldn't have a community there. So it's not going to be so easy where I live, at least. But we'll try to figure it out. So it's that chibur between the Moroccans and the Sephardim and the Hasidim started with the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, and that remained till today. I said that 3 years ago I was not far away from this hotel, or maybe it's even in this hotel. There was an OU restaurant. And I had a couple from Muncie that was eating right next to us, and I told them to go to the Beis HaKvaros to see the Orach Chaim's Rebbes and Talmidim, and he said, "Was the Orach Chaim had given Sephardi?" The Orach Chaim was a product of this whole golden era. So let's continue through the cemetery. There's just the hilulas that are happening. The Yitzchak Abuchatzera now. These miracles are coming up, just like people are hearing about hilulas of other great gedolim, and the Ribnitzer Rebbe, and the Reb Shayele, and all the great tzaddikim that their zichuyot. I mean, as we know, Reb Shayele, even in his lifetime in Hungary, people would always go for yeshuot. They were poel yeshuot, and Rav Amram ben Diwan was known as a poel yeshuot, and that zichut stayed even after he passed away. So these tzaddikim are able to be poel yeshuot, which is going to lead me to Lala Solika very soon. So, but I'm not finished with the cemetery. You have Rav Yehuda ben Atar. Rav Yehuda ben Atar was the Av Beddin of the city of Fez, together with Rav Yaakov ibn Sur. So in the middle of the cemetery, if somebody's facing the forest and the highway, to the left, if you go all the way down, you'll notice Rav Yaakov ibn Sur. The whole Ibn Sur dynasty is buried there. We're talking about 10 or 12 different Ibn Sur Rabbanim. Right now, as we speak, one of his grandchildren is Rabbi Raphael Ovid ibn Sur, who was a nephew of the Or HaChaim's sister, nephew of the Or HaChaim's sister. I have it right, unless it was he was the son, and he has a ksav yad that was never published before, and just a few months ago we were able to start working on this manuscript, and he's buried over here. Nobody knows about him. Tremendous Torah on the Abu Dram and on Halacha and the Or HaChaim. Nobody knows. It's a manuscript that's sitting that's sitting dormant, and these weren't tzaddikim that didn't have scholarship of Torah behind them. Fez was a city of yeshivas and of Torah, of great kedusha v'tahara together with Torah. So that's Rav Yaakov ibn Tzur sat on the bedding with Rav Yehuda ben Atar. He was a Talmud Chaver of his. Rav Yehuda ben Atar, just to give you one story of his, he was walking to Mincha, and a storekeeper wanted to go eat lunch, but he was too lazy to bring in all of his bags that were outside of the door. So he saw Rav Yehuda ben Atar pass. He says, "Do you mind just staying over here by the store while I go eat lunch?" So what did Rav Yehuda ben Atar say? He says, "No problem." Rav Yaakov ibn Tzur passes by. So put yourself in this scenario, right by where the cemetery, by the Melach over there. Rav Yaakov ibn Tzur passes by. He says, "El Kabir, great one. What are you doing sitting over here by the store?" He says, "Well, I was on my way. This Yid needed help. He needs help. He asked me for help. I told myself that it's written in the Yerushalmi when they asked the Tana what's called humility. He says that whatever a person asks you, you do. They say the Mashgiach of the Mirab, Yeruchim, would sometimes ask a child what's the weather outside, and if the child would say it's too cold, he wouldn't go outside. He says, I have to listen to this boy. That's what he told me. It's a certain sense, it's a certain limud of anava. So Rav Yehuda ben Atar said, my friend, I never understood pshat in this Yerushalmi. If somebody's telling me to do a mitzvah, of course I have to listen to him. If he's telling me to do a chesed, to speak on behalf of the government, of course I have to do a chesed. So what's the chiddush of him telling me something that I have to listen to him? Obviously it's something like this, that he's asked me to watch his store. So I'm watching his store. And isn't it just like Azov Tazovimo, that if somebody has a donkey that needs help, or somebody needs his tire changed, so I'm the Chaveirim, a Fez of the 1700s. So that's what I'm here for. So the first member of Chaveirim, a Fez, Rav Yehuda ben Atar, the great one. That's just one story that comes to mind of Rav Yehuda ben Atar together Rav Yaakov ibn Tzur. There was a merchant that was walking in from the city of Sofro carrying a heavy load of figs. He didn't even notice it was Rav Yehuda ben Atar. He asked him, hey, could you help me with this load? Sure. Rav Yehuda ben Atar was actually in the outskirts because he was thinking and learning. He wandered out. He was thinking and learning. He says, of course. They say, I have a frock. I'm a Rosh Yeshiva. How do you dare ask me to carry your bag? That's not what he answered. He said, sure. He took the figs and he was schlepping it on his way back to Fez. And Rav Yaakov ibn Tzur once again says, Rabbi, what's going on? What are you doing? He says, the guy asked me. And when the person saw what happened, he was mortified, of course. And Rav Yehuda ben Atar told him, I'm sorry, it's written Azov Tazovimo. I'm here to help, whatever I could do. That was Rav Yehuda ben Atar, and obviously the zichuyot that remain with him till today, just the yeshuot that are obviously people are davening by the kaver, and his talmidim around him. Rav Yaakov ibn Tzur, there's the Serrero family. I'm not going to get into all these names now. I'd be staying a long time. The Serrero family, the Ibn Denan family. In the Mela of Fez, if we go in, there's going to be a synagogue called the Ibn Denan Synagogue. 2017, I visited this synagogue. It's guarded by Muslims that charge to see it. And the lady wanted to show me a Sefer Torah. She took out a Sefer Torah and put it on the floor to show it out. Not to me this happened, but to our friends beforehand, they showed me pictures. It's a bizayon. It wasn't a kosher Sefer Torah. It was split in half, actually. The gvil was split in half. But it's a bizayon. On the floor On the bottom floor, there's a mikveh that was built that the men would use as well. For the men would use for in the morning, and I don't know where the women's mikveh was, but that was right on the bottom of the shul. So you can still see that if you go tomorrow to the Ibn Dinan synagogue. That was the Ibn Dinan dynasty. I mentioned here of Shlomo Ibn Dinan, 1900s. He's coming from that rabbinic family. So I just want to get the names right. We have the Ibn Atar in the middle. Rav Shmuel Elbaz, the Rosh Yeshiva, that the Orach Chaim said he had his 48 kinyanim. Rav Yaakov Kenizal, they used to daven for rain. Rav Eliyahu Tzarfati, right next to Lala Solika. If you go to the left, it's the Ibn Tzur dynasty. If you go to the right, it's the Cave of the Lions. In back, you're going to go up the stairs and see Rav Vidala Tzarfati. Rav Vidala Tzarfati, if you say for the 1500s to the 1200s, how many generations is that? We'll call it, 10 generations? Let's just for argument's sake. I know that it depends how you calculate generations. Direct descendant of Rabbeinu Tam. It's written over there also, the Shalsheles. Direct descendant of Rabbeinu Tam, which means Rashi. They escaped from France to go to Spain, and from Spain they came to Morocco. The Tzarfati family were one of the great Geonim on the Batei Dinim. Rav Vidala Tzarfati is the Tzuf Dvash. The Chida quotes him in a few places in his Sfarim. He was known as the Gadol Hador in the 1600s. When the cemetery where Rav Yehuda ben Atar is, unfortunately, had to be moved because you'll see right outside there's the king's palace. They moved the king's palace once, and they had to move it again in the 1800s, and they had to move the bones of Rav Yehuda ben Atar, of Lala Solika, of Rav Eliyahu Tzarfati, of Rav Yaakov Kenizal. Unfortunately, it was this Galglu at Smoisem, and it was, and that's where it is. When they tried to move Rav Vidala Tzarfati, my cousin Eli Deviko Alav Shalom, who is his wife should be coming soon. She still lives over here. His alma should be coming soon. He's buried on the top. Why is he buried on the top? He told me that when they tried to move the caver, there was earthquakes and there was thunder and lightning. They left it alone. That's the tradition that they have. Why Rav Vidala Tzarfati, you're going to have to go up 2 flights to go to his caver with his Talmidim and go back down. So that's, in a nutshell, some of the highlights of a few of the famous Chachamim that are in the cemetery of Fez. Now let's get to Lala Solika. In 1834, Solika Chachwal lived. She was an ordinary girl, by all means. Her father had Shiurim, Gemara Shiurim in his house. He was a businessman in the port city of Tangiers in the 1800s. When I research stories, I do not like to say things that are not substantiated. And I researched many, many different sources on the exact story of Lala Solika, of Solika Chachwal. There is one great Rav from the city of Fez. His name is Rav Yosef Benayim. Passed away in the 60s. His library, he had an extensive library. It's mostly in Yeshiva University now in Manhattan. And Rav Yosef Benayim he wrote up a whole sefer called Malchi Rabbanan of all the Moroccan Rabbanim. You can find it on HebrewBooks.org or on Eitzar HaChachma, Malchi Rabbanan. All of the Moroccan Rabbanim. There's actually a Chelik Beis they recently found, but there you could find the history of many of these Rabbanim. One amazing thing that he writes over there that I mentioned to somebody yesterday is that, I digress. I'm sorry? In 2017, I was writing a volume on Choshen Mishpat, on Moroccan Minhagim Choshen Mishpat. I wrote on Orach Chaim, Yoredeya, and Even Ezer. And Choshen Mishpat, I was in the middle of writing, but it was very hard. I was like really having a very hard time to figure out how to break it in or not. Then I was my first time on a trip to Morocco in 2017. One of the one of my yedidim from Los Angeles, who's from originally from Morocco. He brought me to, and he organized a trip. And we went there to the kever of Rav Yitzchak bin Walid in Tangiers, in Tetuan, which was right next to Tangiers. I have to tell you, I felt a shechina on that kever that I never felt before. It was a pachad. I said it over to somebody yesterday, he said he felt the same thing. In Tetuan, Rav Yitzchak bin Walid, and I daven by Rav Yitzchak that I should have siyata dishmaya in the sefer. I found out afterwards that Baba Meir, Reb Meir Abu Chatzera, said that there are 2 kvarim today that he knows that the Shechina you feel. The Orach Chaim HaKodesh's kever in Har HaZeitim and Rav Yitzchak ben Walid in Tetuan. I felt that I'm not a holy person that feels Shechina wherever I go. I'll tell you that much. But I did feel something there. I'm telling you, I felt it was pachad. Just like what you felt by Avram ben Diwan yesterday, is I pachad. And then that was Baba Meir. Then I opened up this book of Rav Yosef ben Naim, that he writes, V'yadua shemi poked ala kever of Rav Yitzchak ben Walid, he feels a certain shechina and kedusha there. No connection to Rav Baba Meir. I don't know if they knew each other, they knew what each other said about this kever, but it was right there. So, either way, right after when I came back to Los Angeles, I started having siyata dishmaya in the sefer, and it was through the Sfarim of Rav Yitzchak ben Walid, Vayomer Yitzchak, and another sefer of Rav Rafal Kawa that we visited right afterwards, who's buried in the city of Saleh. So, this was the time in Tangiers, which was right next to Rav Yitzchak ben Walid in the 1800s, in 1834. So I was trying to research the exact details of the story. It wasn't at all something that was easy to find, but I have 3 sources. One source is from Rav Yosef ben Naim, where he writes at the end of Malchei Rabbanan, Ma'aseh Hatzadeket. I sent it to Rabbi Haber yesterday, the details of the story. Another is that I just found is from a secular source, but somebody called Eugenio Maria Romero, like 20 or something years after the story happened, heard about this great lady Solika, and he traveled he traveled in order to get eyewitnesses of the scene. I addressed myself to an eyewitness to the scene, and my heart began ever open to misfortune. This was written in Ladino. I have a friend who didn't invite me to his wedding, even though I buy many, many things from him. His name is Jeff Bezos. He doesn't know me, but I buy many things from him. So I found on his website, this book was translated in English, but it's not the English that you and I are used to speaking. It's a very flowery British English that it's the translator translated the story. It's quite accurate. It's coming from eyewitnesses. And the third source is from a piyut of Rav Yaakov Abu Chatzera, who was 27 years old at the time, in a whole different section in Morocco. But he heard about the story, and he wrote the details of the story in the piyut, Et Godel Shevach HaNe'ara, a beautiful, beautiful song that I would like that we sing it together. If Shimon Derry is going to be here, is he here? Is there Shimon here? No. That we'd be able to sing it together eventually and see his version of the story. The details are all here. So what happened with Solika Hatzadeket, I'm going to read from some of the excerpts of this book. I saw the bitter tears flow from the eyes of her respectable parents. And thinking on the past, I shed mine on the spot where the unfortunate victim breathed. So this person went to actual parents to speak to them about what happened. The lovely, they call her over here, Phoebe. Her name was Solika. Formed an acquaintance and friendship with a Moorish female named Tahara del Mismudi, who lived in the neighborhood. At times, with her mother's permission, she would direct her steps to her friend's house. And he goes on to explain that one time her mother, Simcha, disapproved of their relationship of friends. And one time, the mother, making sure that Solika was doing her chores at home, Solika wanted to have a little bit more freedom, so she left. She got into a little bit of argument with her mother, and she left. Nothing major. But having bad friends, unfortunately, caused her to have a fateful mistake, that this artful friends went in conversation with the young Jewess, but as if unsignally never failed to boast of the excellence of her religion, of Islam, its benefit it's offered. And her friend, Solika was a polite girl, so she just listened. But her friend would keep on saying how amazing what's going on with her religion, and eventually she wore her down. That she said, "Why don't you become a Jew? Why don't you become?" She said something like that. Solika was quiet, didn't say a word. But in her crafty wickedness, she went to the governor and to the authorities and say, "Oh, my friend wants to, she converted to Islam, she accepts Islam." And once they do that, said it's very hard to retract. But she never did. And at that time, Solika started this whole episode that they accused her of wanting to of retracting on what she said, which she never said before. And they brought her to the governor. And then the prince, there's apparently a story, it's not so explicit over here, that somebody wanted to marry her and that's why he did it. Didn't happen exactly that way. It happened a little bit later. But Solika was, from that time in Tangiers, she was brought to the governor, and he said that you have to convert, and now there's no choice, and you have to do it. And then there started to become a vicious agenda against her to start making sure that she doesn't go back because she had tremendous beauty. Her beauty was legendary. They weren't used to a fair looking woman she was coming from European, more Spanish lineage. They weren't used to that. And she was very beautiful. And they wanted to say that, she's one of ours and she'll become a wife of one of the princes or whatever else. Solika understood what was going on. She had tremendous clarity that she had a nisayon over here because things were happening in an abnormal fashion. It wasn't just like some type of random nisayon. She saw that the hashgacha was leading her in a way that they were testing her faith. And she kept on saying, "I'm a Jewess, I'm a daughter of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, and Leah, and I will not give up my religion no matter what." And she was uncompromising, and they saw that as a big insult. I'll just read to you. "I will patiently," replied the Jewess, "bear the weight of your chains. I will give my limbs to be torn piecemeal by the wild beasts. I will renounce forever the light of day. I will perish of hunger. And when all the evils of life are accumulated on me by your orders, I will smile at your indignation and in the anger of your prophet, since neither he nor you have been able to overcome a weak female. It is clear that heaven is not auspicious to making proselytes to your faith." Now you understand, she was very adamant, and they didn't like that. A weak Jewish female is going to conquer their authority. Reminds you the story of Hannah and Shiva Baneya. Atrocious blasphemer, exclaimed the outraged governor. You have profaned the name I revere. You are unworthy of my consideration. I will bury you in a secret dungeon and smile when you will drink the cup of bitterness. This went on and on for 3 years. They didn't know what to do because the Spanish government got involved and said, how dare you imprison a Jewess just because you want to convert her to your religion? And they didn't want to get into problems with them. There many Jews tried to intervene. Usually with bribes, this would work. I mean, that's how I learned to drive over here when I was 13 years old. I knew that if I would get in trouble, my cousin would bribe them and I would be okay. These are small things. What's going on over there, bribes would always work. And over here, nothing worked. They were adamant. They brought her from the city of Tangiers in chains. In a few days, a courier arrived with dispatches from the emperor. In one, it was ordered that the enchained Jewess should be sent immediately to Fez. So unpleasant expected result caused consideration to all when he heard it. But the fatal order had arrived, and there was no alternative but to obey it promptly. I'm going to stop over here. I have to leave right now, but we will continue the story, part 2. I would like to say it berabim. That way, I'm sure a lot of other people are going to want to come tomorrow morning. I want to say the end of the story with everyone hearing, and then we are going to have the zichut of going to the kever to ask for yeshuot, and I'll say about a few yeshuot that have happened or a kever over the years, and different great stuff that has happened. But it was a pleasure speaking now, and B'ezrat Hashem we'll continue it. What's the name of the